I'm very happy to be bringing you these news briefings, and I'm stoked to see the channel grow the way that it has been. Thank you so much for your support and your feedback. Thank you to all of you people who have subscribed. I'm so happy about it, and we've reached a significant milestone here, breaking past 50 subscribers. Thank you to all of you. Seriously, a round of applause. I couldn't do this without you folks. So let's keep it up. Keep sharing this channel. Keep sharing the information. Today, we've got some very serious things to talk about, and I want to begin the video really asking the question, how did we get here? And I want to talk a bit about the history of the cannabis industry, going way back as far as I could do research to the 1800s. Now, in the 1800s, even before that, as far as 300, even 400 years ago, hemp was grown worldwide and grown practically compulsively in many societies and cultures, especially in the Americas, but really worldwide. In the early 1800s, it was also something that was vital to the construction of ropes and sails for the transportation of goods and people across these oceans, across the Atlantic, to and from America, between America and Europe. Now, it's just incredible looking back that far, where these folks could even pay taxes in hemp to the government, looking all the way to today, where we still have to fight for the right to cultivate industrial hemp, even after the 2018 Farm Bill. Now, a fun fact, actually in the late 1800s, about 4/5 of the world's landmass of cannabis was being grown in Russia. There's photos, I'll show you here, of these Russian ladies, you know, out in the fields with massive cannabis plants, and there was no stigmatization of it back then. I'm sure that people used it for medicinal purposes. I'm sure some people smoked it here and there, but really it was used for nutrition, for fiber, and for industrial purposes. There was no stigma. There was no reason for the stigma. Cue the Industrial Revolution, cue big oil, cue electricity, and then cue World War I, one of the most horrific wars that has ever happened on this planet. And the world had become a drastically different place by the turn of the 20th century. Then cue failed prohibition of alcohol and roping in cannabis. Harry Anslinger's propaganda campaign against marijuana as well, kicking off during this time period of failed prohibition and the Depression, really an awful period of history in the United States. Now, this began really with Harry Anslinger, FDA head, beginning this campaign, taking this case of Victor Licata, an axe murderer, a man who had killed his whole family, and claiming that the man's actions were due to him being high on marijuana. Now, the claim that this man was high on cannabis was then refuted as researchers found that there was no evidence that this man had any history of drug or alcohol abuse whatsoever. His actions were attributed to severe untreated mental illness, and Anslinger was really embarrassed by this. So he went out again. He consulted 30 top medical doctors and pharmacists from around the country, asking them to back him up and to show some evidence that cannabis was a threat to health and the safety of the American populace. Now, 29 of 30 doctors said that cannabis posed no health or safety threat and was not of concern, especially under the guise of national security. Anslinger was pissed, and he took the one of 30 doctors and pharmacists who disagreed with the widespread consensus of the others and, you know, pushed his opinion, published that opinion, and continued his assault on cannabis. Now, even after failed prohibition, cannabis was held under prohibition for almost 100 years. Even today, it's still under prohibition. And this prohibition began with the same law that prohibited alcohol. Now, we see how that went. We see how this war on drugs is going as well. And, you know, this campaign continued through the 20th century, targeting jazz musicians and African Americans with accusations. The strong racial tones also led to the coining of the term marijuana rather than using the name cannabis, the proper name of the plant. So Harry Anslinger began to kind of as well push this terminology, calling the plant marijuana rather than cannabis. And a lot of folks attribute this to his racism as well, trying to paint it with a kind of foreign imagery, a South American or Mexican kind of image to push into the minds of many ignorant and fearful Americans to stigmatize cannabis. And so he used people's ignorance and fear of minority communities again and again and again. But then in the 20th century, we get to 1971. Richard Nixon is elected and the war on drugs is kicked off. This is something that we used to expand private prisons, to incarcerate millions more per capita than any other nation on earth. And, to militarize police and to brutalize minority communities more than they already had been. It's terrible. And we're still fighting the war on drugs. Today, even with states' legalization and the 2018 Farm Bill regulation of industrial hemp, we're still fighting the war on drugs. And this week we see stories. A hemp farmer in Minnesota charged with selling drugs because his industrial hemp tested a little high, apparently, for THC. Now, the man could be heavily fined or even incarcerated. I think that's so sad. And we also see Thrive Market being forced to stop selling CBD and hemp products by their payment processor. So it's not Thrive Market wanting to take these down, but their payment processor is claiming some liability now that they've been selling CBD infused products and hemp-based products for about 18 months. So Thrive Markets is being forced to take them down, and they're trying to remove these products as soon as June 20th. This is very interesting too. I don't know what the liability was, but the payment processors are really hitting the industry hard, as it's hard to bank and it's hard to acquire partners with payment processors and whatnot. Now, we even see more problems. There's a lot of red flags this week as regulators of Health Canada are delaying the rollout of infused edibles and, alternative consumption products in Canada to December instead of October when it was supposed to go. So we're going to see a continued swell of cannabis supply, a reduction of the cost per gram, and stress on the supply-demand dynamics in the Canadian marketplace especially. This is not good, especially for big producers like Aurora Cannabis. So again, like I've been saying, we could look out for further pullback. I think anything from here or lower is a good buying opportunity, but I don't expect this delay to be something that severely damages the prices of these stocks. It should slow them down in the near term, though, without some big deals or some very good news. Despite that, we're still seeing increases in revenue and flower sales. But we see more going on as the U.S. and Canadian cannabis industry, the North American, really the American cannabis industry from Canada down through South America, is coming under attack by China. Very interesting. This week, China claimed that the smuggling of American cannabis into their borders was posing a threat to their national security. They're seeing or claiming a 25% increase in cannabis users in China now. But with only 24,000 stated users, this statistic seems to be very small. In a country of 1.3 billion people, 24,000 use it, and China claims that it's posing a threat to their national security. Now, this is interesting. We did some research, folks in the West did, and found that actually 1.6 million cannabis plants were cut down in China just in 2016 alone, and that more cannabis was being exported than imported by students who were the main culprits of this smuggling. You know, a lot of Chinese students who spend a lot of time in America, and then they get to China and they want to continue to have the kind of freedom that they experienced here in the West, but it's a serious crime, and China is stating that it poses a threat to their national security. China is a state that executes roughly 500 people per year for drug offenses, possession, trading, or attempt to distribute. So, you know, this is kind of scary for a lot of people in China, and I don't know the effects of this for the American cannabis industry, but something tells me that this attack by China may have some pull on regulators in the West, especially those who are concerned with American Chinese relations. But, you know, we're seeing so much happening in the marketplace. You know, it's kind of a day of red flags, big things going on here, but the industry is growing and growing and growing, and we're seeing these cures and treatments popping up as people continue to do medical research. So, you know, I'm still bullish long term on the cannabis industry, especially on the industrial hemp industry, but I gotta say, it's tough. Looking at today, seeing we're still fighting the war on drugs, and it looks like China is now kind of instituting its own war on drugs against cannabis. It looks like we're still seeing regulators fighting against the cannabis industry and continuing to try and hamper the progress. You know, but we're going to keep fighting. It's just a reminder that we have to continue fighting. This is not over, and we can easily lose the things that we have fought for. Being here in Colorado, we still see this drug war, this war on drugs happening on the outside, even though we've enjoyed a free cannabis marketplace with hemp and cannabis products since 2014. So I hope that the rest of the world can get on board. I think that they will, and we're going to see big things happening between now and December through the rest of 2019. So keep watching, stay tuned, and you know, this is something that you should think about when you're investing in the cannabis industry. And looking at the history, you can just see the kind of potential that it has, as we're eventually going to start using industrial hemp for more than we ever have before. But, you know, we've got a lot of catching up to do. We sure do. Thank you anyways for listening to this video. Please do subscribe if you haven't already, and leave me a like and comment. Now, this is some more of this great music. I hope that you all enjoy it, and until next time, much love, and I will see you then.
Know your place. Ask no questions, do your job.